The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
It's your turn here on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. Now, here's the host of Your Turn.
Welcome to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallops. You are in the Oval Office, the White House, of Gulf Coast Talk Radio, broadcasting to parts of 4 states along the Gulf Coast, and broadcasting to the nation and the world by live stream on the Internet. Carl is not ashamed of the Word of God, the Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence. He does not care about political correctness, nor does he depend upon a teleprompter or popularity polls. Carl stands for truth, reason, and common sense. Carl firmly believes that America is God's gift to the world. If any of that interests you, you are at the right place. Freedom Friday on 1330 WEBY. Now, here's Carl Gallops.
All right, welcome back, Gulf Coast. Welcome back, America. You are listening to Freedom Friday. Mallory Bardwell, your world-famous producer, at the top of the second hour. And my guest, as I have promised, is Mike Zullo, none other than the lead investigator for the Sheriff Arpaio cold case, Posse Obama fraud case. And Mike Zullo, God bless you. I hope I'm not over using my welcome because I know people want you on their programs. You're all over the place, and you're such a busy guy, and people interview you from coast to coast. And so far, every time I've called you and said, Mike, can you come on and address this, you've been gracious enough to do it. And God bless you. Thanks for being on again today.
Carl, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Well, and I do mean that because I know that there are many other things you need to be doing, but thank you for taking time out. And Mike, you know the reason I had you on, so let me just remind our listening audience what's going on here, and then I'm going to speak for the next 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to hush and let Mike do a lot of the talking, if not all of it, because what he has to say will be important in relation to what I'm going to say. Several months ago, Mike Zullo and I went to CPAC 2013 up in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area, and then from there we went over to Capitol Hill. We visited with several Congress people. That's when we had the meeting with Alan West. That's when, or Mike Zullo did. That's when we had the meeting with Steve Stockman. That's when we had the meeting with Congressman Jeff Miller and others, and some whom we're not allowed to speak their names yet. But and that's when we were just kind of hobnobbing, rubbing shoulders and elbows with VIPs to see if we could get anybody to look at this criminal investigation evidence as a result of this 2-year investigation. So you know that. Well, we told you we went to Capitol Hill to visit with some congressmen and some chiefs of staff, and we did. Well, one of the congressmen that we visited with, I had a good meeting, a 30-minute meeting, and about 30 minutes or so, and with the chief of staff. And I'm not going to go into the details of this because this is where I want Mike Zullo just to tell it as he remembers it without any coaching from me. So I'm going to give you the skeleton outline and what the deal is here. The deal is that we had this meeting, and in that meeting it was agreed upon that when this particular congressman, who I've given his name now, I mean, we promised you months ago we would give his name if he didn't do the right thing. Well, he never did the right thing. And his name is Jeff Miller, Florida District 1 Congressman. His chief of staff is Dan McFall. The booking secretary's name is Jessica. Jessica, Dan McFall, Jeff Miller, I'm going to tell you, they were very gracious. They were very kind. They did everything they told us they would do as far as receiving us, having a meeting with us. Jessica was just wonderful on the phone. Her emails to me were polite, to the point. Dan McFall, all of that. So I have no complaints with any of that. But follow me now. So we have this meeting, and Mike Zullo talks with the congressman. I'll let him give you his view of it in a moment. And it was agreed upon that when Jeff Miller came back to Florida, that Mike Zullo would fly to Florida and that I was to be in that meeting. We were to come back together and meet with Jeff Miller in his office, and Mike Zullo was going to bring certain information. I'm going to let Mike tell you about that and what the congressman wanted with that information. From there, we came home. And after, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 days, I started emailing Jeff Miller's office through Dan McFall and Jessica saying, now, look, when's this meeting going to take place? Mike has to make the arrangements. And so I've got this whole email chain, which I have printed on the Internet. And I can read the very last one to you in a moment because I think the last one's kind of the money shot email. And we had emails and phone calls, but the email chain is what's important because that's a matter of public record, and I possess them, and you know, I guess most anybody could get them if they requested them through the proper channels. But the bottom line is, so we get home, and I go through several days of emails and phone calls, and here's the last email. This is from Jessica. Now, I've got emails from Dan McFall, the chief of staff, that are similar to this, but it says, "Hi, Carl. The office meeting next Thursday will take place in Congressman Miller's Pensacola office located at 4300 Bayou Boulevard, Suite 13. Let me know if you have any other questions. Congressman Miller looks forward to seeing you and Lieutenant Zullo at 9 a.m. Thanks, with an exclamation point, Jessica." I wrote her back, said, "Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate your help. Lieutenant Zullo will bring all the information requested. We look forward to the congressman's input and assistance." Now, all of that is fine. But what happens is a day or two after that email and the finality of that meeting, I got a call from Dan McFall, the chief of staff, telling me, and my wife was sitting in the room, so she heard my side of the conversation, telling me that the meeting was nixed. There would be no meeting. And now, folks, hear me. Even that's okay with me. But then he said the reason the meeting was nixed is because they never asked for the meeting in the first place. They didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't know anything about a meeting with Lieutenant Zullo. What in the world was I talking about? I was Jeff Miller's constituent, not Zullo. Why did I think that the congressman wanted a meeting with Lieutenant Zullo? And I told Dan McFall, I said, "Dan, this is surreal. Certainly, this is not how you're going to handle it." In other words, you're trying to make me think I'm crazy. You're trying to make me think I'm just a big old fat liar, and that I don't know what I'm talking about. I said, "But you forgot. I've got this whole email chain coming from your office and Jessica's office, wherein Lieutenant Zullo is named by you and by me and by Jessica, that you knew he was coming and you were setting up the meeting for Lieutenant Zullo." At which point the phone almost went dead. I had to ask him, "Are you still there?" And then he let it be known that he was not real happy about me using that email chain, because basically he was trying to gaslight me. So anyway, I'm through talking. The bottom line is, I've told you who it was. This is the kind of despicableness that we've run into, that Mike Zullo has run into for years. A lot of you have asked the question of, why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? Because you've got congressmen saying, "Okay, I'll meet. Line it up. All right, meet. And then we get calls. We don't know what you're talking about. All right, Mike Zullo, I'm going to hush. To the best, Mike, just tell the folks, we went to Capitol Hill. You take it from there and tell what you remember. And if I said anything different from what you remember, just correct me. I don't care. I just want the truth. So you just tell what you remember and how all this came down.
Well, Carl, to back up a little bit, this meeting was actually put together by you prior to us going to CPAC. So the meeting at Capitol Hill that day was already in the works as we were traveling.
Right.
And if memory serves, we got that confirmation the day or the day after we arrived. Like you said, we arrived at Capitol Hill, but the original meeting was supposed to be a lunch meeting.
Right.
We were going to be having lunch in the same rooms there senators and congressmen convened for lunch. And that on our en route, as we were en route, that got canceled. We got a phone call. There was some voting going on. He wasn't going to be able to do lunch, but they still instructed us to go to the Capitol, and he would have about 15, 20 minutes in between voting sessions to do that. So we arrived at the Capitol. We were met by Dan after going through the metal scanners and everything that goes on there. Dan was gracious. He walked us through underground corridors to get to where we had to have this little meeting. We entered this very majestic room. It was like full of history. It was incredible. We sat down. We talked to Dan for, I think it was about 30 minutes, and explaining to Dan what we were looking to accomplish. At that point, the congressman came in. He sat down. I went over with him what we had, what we were investigating under Sheriff Arpaio. And the congressman was very attentive. I mean, he asked a lot of questions, and he asked one question in particular that actually thrilled me. He asked if I would be willing to give over our forensic evidence to him for his independent review and analysis through people that he is associated with.
Right. And he serves on the Select Committee on Intelligence, and we knew that, so we figured, well, he could surely get it done. Go ahead.
Yes, and when he did that, I was thrilled. This is somebody that's serious. So that was the premise for the following meeting, and I agreed to do that. When we left, we were given a tour, and I do recall you making a gesture to him. I believe it was a handshake, and said, you know, please tell me you're going to follow through with this. I remember him saying that this was going to happen, and we left. Over the coming days, there was email notification that this meeting was going to take place. You alerted me via email and telephone call that this was going to happen on such a date and the location, and I promptly notified Sheriff Arpaio, and I then made the reservations for airfare and hotel and I believe a rental vehicle. It wasn't but 24 hours after that you called me and told me that they canceled the meeting.
Right.
And we were kind of in the dark for a little bit as to why. I thought maybe it was just going to be postponed. And then you ended up calling me and telling me the story that you just relayed, that the telephone conversation was like being in the Twilight Zone.
Right.
That it was nothing is what transpired. And I do remember you and I talking and going, God, do they know that they have emails saying something completely different?
Right.
And, you know, at that point, you know, you try to dust it off. And you try to sit back and you try to say to yourself, look, what happened here? Here is somebody that I know was interested. I know was paying attention to what I was saying. I don't believe for 1 minute at that time that congressman was giving me lip service.
No, I didn't either. I thought he was very sincere. I was thrilled.
And something changed.
Yeah.
And when you told me as this progressed over, I think this went on for a couple of days, you told me that they were willing to meet with you but didn't want to meet with me.
Right.
That was the telling sign for me.
Right.
They don't want to know what we have.
Right.
And that seems to be a reoccurring theme. And, you know, maybe by telling the story, your listening audience can understand why this is taking so long. Because it's something we've encountered over and over and over again.
Right. And you know what's so interesting, Mike? You said they didn't want to know what you had. But at that meeting on Capitol Hill, not only did he want to know what you had, but he wanted to take that information and submit it to his own forensics. He was so interested. And then all of a sudden, he didn't want to know anything that you had.
And that's right. That's right, Carl. And when you have somebody that's on the committee that he's on and he says he wants to get it independently reviewed, I couldn't wait for that to happen.
Right, because you're that sure of the information you have.
Yes, you know, that's what I relayed to Sheriff Arpaio.
Yeah.
Before I made the meeting, that he wants the info and he wants to get it independently verified, and, you know, Arpaio was delighted.
Right. And Arpaio has said, you have said, I have said, and we told the congressman, all we want is the truth. If we turn it all over to you and you can show us with verifiable evidence that it's all a crock, we'll walk away from it. I mean, we were anxious for him to take a look at it, just like you took it before all the sheriffs and police chiefs and attorneys and laid it out. I mean, you were anxious for a peer review, and he was anxious to do it. But the next thing, I get a call. And, you know, well, Mike, listen, we got to take a break. I've got all kind of analysis I want you and I to do on this when we come back, plus we can take some phone calls. Are you up for that?
that'll be fine.
Okay, good. Folks, you are listening to Freedom Friday. Mike Zullo is my guest this afternoon. You know what we're talking about. If you want to be a part of this, 623-1330, area code 850. By the way, go to carlgallops.com, click on the Freedom Friday link. At the top of the page, you'll see a bright yellow link to this Congressman Jeff Miller and his email chain. If you'll click on that, not only is the whole story there and all of the emails, but every address and phone number to all of his offices so that you can be a part of letting them know how absolutely enraged you are that this has been done to Lieutenant Zullo and this process. We'll be right back after this timeout.
But this is why you listen to Carl. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallops, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
And welcome back, Gulf Coast, and welcome back, America. My guest this afternoon, Lieutenant Mike Zullo, the Cold Case Posse Lead Investigator. So, Mike, so you believe this is kind of a pattern, don't you? I mean, we're watching videos coming out now, town hall meetings, people going, bringing your affidavit to these meetings, trying to get this before other congressmen, and many of them are just kind of turning away these people, throwing their hand up in their face, saying, I don't want to see it, I don't want to touch it, I don't want to be involved with it. What do you think's going on, Mike?
Well, I think it is a pattern, and I think it's orchestrated. It's becoming pretty evident. You know, first of all, it's hands off.
Yeah.
The second thing that I've been noticing is they are saying things along the lines of the first Congress should have dealt with this, or we had 4 years to settle this matter. The truth is, yes, there were 4 years to settle the matter, that nobody did anything about it.
Right.
Arpaio, before that 2012 election, for re-election of the president, Arpaio did 2 press conferences saying there's a problem here.
Right.
I mean, other than putting a banner up on an airplane and flying it over the White House, I don't know what else you could do with it.
Right.
You know, so I'm seeing this pattern. And I am really starting to suspect that the people that we've been contacting, because we've been well received when we've met face-to-face.
Right.
It's only after some things start to take place that they start with these excuses. And to me, this looks like it's something that is orchestrated from the top down.
Yeah. You think, they're getting phone calls and pressure and arms twisted. Let's go to the phone lines for just a moment here. Carl the caller, welcome to Freedom Friday with the other Carl, the host, and Mike Zullo. What's your question for Mike, Carl?
Mike, I'm just wondering how we break this logjam, because I've been involved in this as well. And Jeff Miller is my representative also, and this kind of thing has just gone on long enough. So what do we do to change the dialogue here? Because if nobody will look at the evidence, how do you ever get something that's wrong fixed?
Thank you, Carl. And that's a great question. I'm going to let Mike answer that. And I can tell you, we do have a couple of congressmen that are looking at it and claiming they're going to do some things. We'll see. I mean, if they don't, then we'll out them. But that's a good question. Mike, do you have a reply to him, a response?
You know what, on one level, I think what can be done is maybe just changing the argument a little bit. I think it's imperative that from our standpoint, it's always been about a fraudulent document.
Right.
That needs to be the topic. You know, when you start going off into eligibility, the natural-born citizen, you're going to start having people glaze over.
Right.
The other thing is these people aren't insulting me. They're insulting Sheriff Joseph Arpaio,
right,
a 52-year career lawman, a 30-year federal agent with the DEA. I mean, if he doesn't know what he's talking about, I don't know who does.
Right.
So when they say they don't want to talk to me, what they're effectively saying is they don't want to talk to him about it.
Right.
And I think that, the things that are happening now, people trying to get out there, I would highly recommend, don't be confrontational, but know your topic, know what we're talking about, and as concisely and politely as you can put it out there, try to put it out there.
Right. That's a great answer. And let me say to our listeners, in this case, please call Jeff Miller's office. Go to carlgallops.com, click on the Freedom Friday link, click on the bright yellow headline link about Jeff Miller in the emails. You'll see it. And then you'll have all of the addresses, all of the phone numbers, fax numbers, email. I mean, let them know. Slam their office with phone calls and emails, letting them know that you think this is despicable. Now, hear me, folks. It's not that he wouldn't talk to us, because that's his prerogative. What I'm concerned about is the way he canceled the meeting through his chief of staff, calling me and telling me the meeting was never arranged, calling me a liar, calling me crazy. I'm a 30-year pastor and 10 years in Florida law enforcement. I'm a 60-year-old man, and he's talking to me like I'm 12 years old, like I'm an idiot, and he forgets I've got the whole email chain. I mean, I had to call up Mike Zullo and say, Mike, it's off. But these guys have gone crazy. After Mike had made all of these reservations, and Dan McFall is telling me over the phone. And you want to make matters worse, yesterday I was on the air telling this story. People were slamming the phone lines at Jeff Miller's office. Dan McFall was still continuing the falsehood. He was telling people, well, Carl's mistaken. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I've got the emails. I'm reading the emails over the air, and he's telling people that I don't know what I'm talking about. This is despicable, folks. These are the people that you're sending to Washington. Go ahead, Mike.
Carl, the thing that's missing in this is honor.
Yes.
It would have been no big deal for either Dan or the congressman himself to call me up and say, I've had a change of heart.
Right.
I could appreciate that.
Yep, me too.
But when you have this kind of cover-up, blatant falsehoods, or as you put it earlier, gaslighting, trying to make you doubt your own reality,
right?
You know, that's a problem. And if that's what we could expect on this level,
right,
what else are we not being told the truth about?
I know. It's absolutely unbelievable. Mallory, did we have somebody on line 4 there? Okay. All right. Good. We've got people to call. I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure. Okay. Well, Mike, you made a perfect point. Mike, listen, we're running right up to the bottom of the hour. Could I hold you over for another 5 or 10 minutes on the other side? Can you do that or not?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, good. And then right after that, I've got Mike Shoesmith. But we've got some other things we need to discuss, and we're right at the bottom of the hour. And so, folks, we are going to go away for a few moments, but don't you go away, because you're going to hit. And plus, that'll give you an opportunity to call and to ask Mike some questions if you didn't get to. And then right after that, Mike Shoesmith and I will close the program out. But folks, you are listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallis. My guest this afternoon, Mike Zullo. We're talking about the Jeff Miller debacle and his chief of staff, Dan McFall, and the absolute fraud that they are trying to run over me and Lieutenant Zullo about this meeting. If you have questions about that or comments about that, or if you have questions or comments about the case and you'd like to talk to Mike Zullo about it, call us 623-1330, area code 850. We're going to go away for about 2 or 3 minutes. We'll be right back. You hang on. You don't want to miss what's coming next.
Welcome back to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallops, 1330 WEBY. Carl speaks with ontological certitude and theological indubitableness. For you liberals out there, this means that Carl knows who he is and that he is unashamed to be on a first-name basis with God. Now, here's Carl Gallops.
All right, welcome back, America. Boy, we've got a hopping, popping show for you today. I'm telling you what. I've got Mike Zullo on the line. I've got Mike Shoesmith, who is the executive director of P.P. Simmons News and Ministry. And, of course, Mike Shoesmith is all over this thing as well. And so I'm going to bring Mike Shoesmith and Mike Zullo on in a moment, and the three of us are going to kind of hash through this. But we'll take your phone calls as well. And I see the phones are already ringing, 623-1330, area code 850. So if you've just joined us, folks, we're talking about this debacle with Congressman Jeff Miller, his chief of staff, Dan McFall, booking secretary Jessica, who, when Mike Zullo and I went to Washington and CPAC, we sat down with Congressman Miller and Dan McFall, spoke with them for a good 30 minutes or more about the criminal investigation case. Lieutenant Zullo and Jeff Miller, the congressman, agreed amongst themselves that more needed to be seen. Jeff Miller asked if he could actually take some of that information, submit it to his own forensics. Lieutenant Zullo said, absolutely, let's meet in Florida. They agreed, going to meet in Florida, going to meet with me and Zullo. And so all of those arrangements were made. I've got an entire email chain. Mike made his reservations from Arizona, getting ready to fly in. And the next thing you know, I got a phone call from Dan McFall. How'd you like that poem? I got a phone call from Dan McFall, the chief of staff, who began to try to gaslight me. he began to tell me that they weren't going to have a meeting. They didn't know what I was talking about. What kind of meeting with Zulo was I talking about? They didn't schedule a meeting with him. They never remembered. They never asked for a meeting with Zulo. They didn't remember anything with Zulo having to do anything with this. Well, let me just say, listen to this email chain. I'm not going to read you every word, but I've got in red the important part. All right, to Dan McFall when we got back home, I said, look, do you have any information yet on when Congressman Miller is going to be able to meet with me and meet with Lieutenant Zulo and me? All right, that's my first email to Dan McFall. He writes me back, I don't have a date yet. Carl, I don't have a date yet, but I can assure you Jessica, that's the booking secretary, is working on the congressman's calendar as we speak. All right, that was in reference to Lieutenant Zulo and me. All right, then I get one back from Jessica saying, look, here's a time, we're thinking about it. She says, it's not necessary for Lieutenant Zulo to fly from Arizona for the meeting, as I know this is relatively short notice and he'd have to do all that work, et cetera, et cetera. So she knows Zulo's coming. Now Dan McFall knows Zulo's coming. They both admit it. Then Jessica, I wrote her back and said, no, Zulo's got to be there. That's what the congressman wanted, et cetera, et cetera. She says, okay. She writes me back, and here's the money shot. Carl, the office meeting next Thursday will take place in Congressman Miller's Pensacola office. She gives the address, etc. She says, please let me know if you have any other questions. Congressman Miller looks forward to seeing you and Lieutenant Zulo at 9 a.m. I wrote her back and thanked her. The next day, I get a call from Dan McFall saying, we don't know anything about Lieutenant Zulo. We didn't ask for a meeting. We didn't know he was coming. We didn't know anything about that. We didn't even know that you wanted him there. What are you talking about? Gaslighting me, calling me crazy. I've got the email chain. I told him, I said, brother, you're not going to get away with this. I'm going to publish this. I'm going to talk about it. And the phone went silent. They forgot that I had the email chain. Mike and Mike, welcome to Freedom Friday. I had to set that back up for people that are just joining us. Mike Zulo, welcome.
Thank you, Carl.
Mike Shoesmith, thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, it's an honor to be with you, the giants in the arena of ideas here. Hey, since we're outing the politicians today, listen, somebody sent me the video footage from a town hall meeting with none other than U.S. House of Representatives member from Oklahoma's 2nd District, Mark Wayne Mullen. Somebody smuggled in a camera to his town hall meeting on the 8th of this month, so last week. And a woman stood up and said, listen, what are you going to do about this? And I'm telling you, this woman is an American hero. Yeah. I posted the video to our blog, ppsimmons.blogspot.com. You can see it there. She stood up and she said, listen, Mike Zulo has solidified his case against the president and the fraudulent birth credentials. What are you going to do about it? And she held up the material. She brought it with her. She was going to hand it over to Mark Wayne Mullen. Mullen said, essentially, he said, look, this has all been dealt with. We know that what you're saying is true. We're not refuting any of that. However, the people spoke in the last election and reelected this man. And Mullen actually in the video likens people like Mike Zulo and Carl Gallups and myself and the rest of us who are interested in the truth here on this matter. He likened us to the preacher standing on the street corner yelling out scripture verses at cars as they drive by. He said it's not effectual at all, and we need to stop doing this. He said there is nothing to refute what Zulo and others have come up with. However, it's a dead issue.
Yeah. Let's just stop there, Mike. So, Mike Zulo, you're familiar with that video, and we know that woman was Mickey Booth. We both know her, and so this congressman's attitude, his answer, his reasoning, it's his rationale. It's insane. Give us your take on that. What do you think's going on?
Well, that rationale is shocking. And I believe there were some expletives used in the beginning of that where he just said, I don't give a blank about this.
He did.
It's telling. It's telling as to what you're dealing with. And to draw that kind of parallel between people doing something on a street corner compared to what we're trying to do here, which is a 2-year-long process under Sheriff Joe Arpaio, is just appalling to me.
Yeah.
For people that claim that they don't know anything about this, they sure know how to run away from it.
Right. They sure that's a good response. And and the thing is, and by the way, folks, if you want to join in on this, 623-1330, area code 850. And the thing about it, do what? Okay. I'm not sure if we can make that happen or not. I'm getting some signals from my producer. But the bottom line is, the thing is that what that congressman said was, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he basically said, look, we know this is for real. We know the evidence is there. We know that this guy is not eligible, but the people voted him back in, so, oh, well, let's move on to something else.
Yeah,
I mean, that is despicable, guys. That's like saying, well, the guy robbed the bank, and he got away with the money, and he's already been feeding his family with it, and he's bought a car, so let's just move on to something else.
2014, it could be the end of the GOP. It could mean a supermajority for the Democrats, and people need to wake up and realize that the world economy is at stake here. The Democrats are destroying the economies of the world, and I live in Canada, but listen, I have a dog in this race. I mean, I'm self-employed, and the Canadian economy is suffering as well as the world's economy because the abomination is wiping it out. And listen, we're all concerned, and we're all rooting for the real patriots in America to stand up and get their voices heard on this. And we are. I mean, I am so proud to be a part of what you guys are doing down there. Honestly, and Mr. Zullo, I'm just honored to be on the same line here with you. We will do everything on our end to push this issue forward.
Mike,
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, as well. Mike Zullo, let me just ask you. So when you stood before sheriffs, I mean, you were in a meeting, behind closed doors meeting, that was supposed to last about an hour, and it went on for almost 3 hours or maybe more. You stood before sheriffs, police chiefs, attorneys, elected official, constitutional attorney. I mean, and you presented that entire criminal investigation. By the way, since then, more stuff has come in. More people have come forward. More information has come to light. More investigation has been done. But just a few months ago, I mean, you gave all of the criminal evidence you had to all of these peers, these law enforcement and officials. Did anybody there laugh at what you had? Did anybody mock or scoff? I mean, did they say, oh, well, that's a bunch of birther junk? What was their reaction?
No, it was actually just the opposite. People that never followed it were shocked. People that followed it to some extent were more convinced than ever. As a matter of fact, the constitutional attorney is trying to get in touch with me, I just found out,
right.
Because this individual wants to help. That's how overwhelming the evidence is.
Yeah.
And you have to keep in mind, too, that it's not the evidence of the birth certificate itself. It's other evidence surrounding this, other evidence that we've acquired that puts the whole picture together.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. And Mike, isn't it safe for me to say, for those that are listening to this broadcast that have been concerned about this for years, and they've been trying to get attention of other people only to be marginalized and called a birther and trashed and, name called, isn't it safe to say that these people, regardless of whether Congress ever investigates this or not, based upon what you know, based upon what you're holding, based upon the affidavit you filed, based upon this document examiner out of Hawaii that used to work for Perkins Coie, Obama's law firm, based upon this peer review of Congress people, elected people, constitutional attorneys, etc., isn't it safe to say that those that have been concerned about this, let's go ahead and call ourselves the birthers right now, since that's what the Obama bots have called us. Isn't it safe to say we've been vindicated? I mean, we're right, whether Congress ever looks at this or not.
Well, I think so, Carl, and I think you could take the reactions that we're getting from elected officials. If they thought that this was nothing and people were really, really bothering them, they would hold a 24-hour hearing and deem it all good.
Yeah.
They're not doing that.
Yeah.
They're not doing that because they know there's something terribly wrong here.
Right. Good gracious. Mike Shoesmith, you want to weigh in? I'm sorry, I can't see your faces.
I just wanted to add that people now, this effort is being funded by donations, 100% by donations. Mike Zullo is not being paid to do this. He's doing this as a genuine patriot, United States patriot. So people can go to our blog, ppsimmons.blogspot.com. On the top left corner, you will see the picture of the Cold Case Posse logo there. Just click on that, and that will take you to a site where you can donate your money Put your money where your mouth is. Stop complaining.
Thank you.
And make an effort here. I mean, you won't hear Mike Zullo or Carl Gallups beg for money, but listen, I'm not ashamed to say it. Put your money where your mouth is and donate to this effort, because Mike and Carl, they're flying all over the country. They're meeting with this congressperson and that congressperson. So put your money where your mouth is. Join in on the effort. I mean, we can't expect you to fly to all these places, but you can send these people to these places. Put your money out there where it really matters, where it will make a difference. Do it today. ppsimmons.blogspot.com. Do it now.
Thank you, Mike Shoesmith. And PP Simmons gets not one red penny of that. 100% of the donations goes directly to the Cold Case Posse. Let me remind our listeners, go to carlgallups.com. At the top, click on the yellow, you'll see the yellow Freedom Friday link, and that will take you to the Freedom Friday page. And at the top, you'll see another yellow headline banner about Congressman Jeff Miller and the emails and the scandal that's going on there. And so if you'll click on that, it'll give you all the addresses and phone numbers and fax numbers and emails where you can reach Congressman Miller's office. It's my understanding they're on recess now. I think Congressman Miller is in his Pensacola office. I know Dan McFall, his chief of staff, was taking phone calls from there the other day, or at least at that phone number. And for the local regional area folks, that phone number is 850-479-1183. 479-1183. 479-1183. Again, go to carlgallups.com and get all that information. And we'd like people from all over the nation to call. We know we have a huge national audience, and the Congressman needs to hear. They need to know that we are enraged at the wimpiness, I mean, they're just trashing their oath. They're just throwing down the Constitution. Some of them, like we've just presented, have admitted, we know this guy's not for real. We know he's not eligible, but hey, they voted for him, so let's move on. What are we living in, a banana republic? Mike Zullo, what's next? What's next in the process? Well, you've got some more meetings. You've got some things in the works. I know there's a lot that's going on that you can't tell us, but can you give us any hints?
Well, I do have more meetings. As a matter of fact, I have one next week. We're just going to keep pushing forward, Carl.
Right.
You just can't stop. If you stop, it's a guarantee that it goes nowhere.
Right.
You have to keep trying. You have to keep fighting the fight. And, as days go on, there's even more news publications by people that are talking now, and stories related around this birth certificate from Reggie Love,
right,
a close associate to Mr. Obama, made an astonishing admission that the birth certificate was lost and then he found it.
Right.
He didn't find it. They spent $2 million making sure nobody could find it, and then what did they write to Hawaii for?
Right, exactly.
He found it?
But yet his body man, Reggie Love, says just a few days ago, like you just said, where we were looking all over for it, we couldn't find it, but we finally found it. What? Oh, my gosh. Well,
that's what happens when you keep telling lie upon lie, you can't remember the lie you told 5 days ago.
That's right. You can't remember who you told it to and who's going to tell the next lie. Tell you what, guys, we've got to take a brief time out. We will come back more with Mike Zullo and Mike Shoesmith, Carl Gallups, Freedom Friday. Help me, Mallory. It's my understanding, because we've got these two guys on, we can't take callers right now. Is that right? Because of the way the lines work? Okay, that's what I thought you were trying to tell me. So for those of you that have been desperately trying to call and be a part of the show, I am so sorry. But with us hooking these guys up, one on the VIP line, one on one of our rotator crossover lines, we're not going to be able to take your calls. So Mike Zullo, Mike Shoesmith, and I will just continue to lay this out, and we'll have Zullo back on very soon where he can take your calls. All right, we'll be back after this timeout. Don't go anywhere.
How can one man bother so many people by simply telling the truth? Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, welcome back, America. Let me tell you what a gracious gentleman Mike Shoesmith is. Mike Shoesmith, I was just talking to him. He's just, of his own volition, agreed or offered to drop off the line so that callers could call in. Because the way our phone lines work here, when we've got somebody on the VIP line, we're not able to bring somebody else on as a VIP guest and then also take phone calls. So the phone lines are open now for callers, and Mike Zullo is still on the air. So we've got a few moments. We've got 6 or 7, 8 minutes, so we take a couple of calls. If you'd like to call in, 850-623-1330, 850-623-1330, because I know you guys had questions. By the way, Mike Zullo, thank you for coming on at the last moment. Instead of staying 30 minutes, you've stayed an hour. God bless you.
Thank you, Carl. No problem.
Absolutely. And let me just say, Mike Shoesmith wanted me to say, folks, contact this Representative Mullins out in Oklahoma, because Mike Shoesmith has done some investigation on him and found that the guy claims to be a born-again Christian, a Pentecostal Christian. He needs to just be gently reminded and loved on, and that, love rejoices in the truth, and God delights when truth is spoken. And this man needs to deal with this. He needs to deal with the truth. Don't shove Mickey Booth off in a corner and cuss at her and trash her down in front of a town hall meeting, saying in effect, and I'm going to have to paraphrase his words, we know this guy is fraudulent, we know the evidence is there, but I'm not going to deal with it because the people voted him back in. Let's move on to some other topic. That's as ludicrous. Mike Zullo used to be a lawman. I mean, I used to be a lawman. Mike Zullo is still involved in law enforcement and lead investigator of this cold case posse. That's as ludicrous as saying, this guy robbed a bank, he got the money, but he got away with it, and he's already spending the money, so let's just not deal with it. Mike, this is the kind of stuff you've been dealing with for 2 years. This is why it's been such a long, slow, grinding process, right?
It is. It's been a long process dealing with this. And, the other point I want to make, Carl, is these people like to say, well, you're not our constituent. Right. Well, if you look at your title, it doesn't say Florida or Oklahoma. It says United States Congressman.
Correct.
And last I checked, that's where we're all living.
That's right. Thank you. And
I really am appalled by that excuse as well.
Yeah. And the talking points, I mean, it's sickening, because you and I have seen these talking points over and over again coming from so-called conservative congressmen, and we realize that they're being fed these talking points. I mean, there's an agenda among even in the so-called conservative party to shut this thing down, even though apparently they know this guy is illegal. He's more than likely, I'm going to say this, Mike, you don't have to agree with this, but based upon what I know, more than likely he wasn't even born in the United States. I mean, that's the commander-in-chief, folks. Good gracious.
Well, Carl, the other thing that I'm becoming increasingly concerned about is, where does this nation go from here? Because with the ideas that are floating out there now, the division that's out there, you can't coexist anymore.
Right.
It seems to be one side or the other.
Right.
And that's a recipe for disaster.
It is a recipe.
And I just don't know how we can move forward. And the deeper we go into this issue, it just becomes such a glaring reality to me, right, that we are so fractured that I don't really know if there's going to be a remedy that's peaceful.
Right.
And I'm hoping that bringing this kind of truth out can do something to mend that.
Right. And I know that's a lot of people's concern. And it's also true, isn't it, though, that at this point we still have a couple of congressmen who are engaged, who are very interested, who are making us some, I'm going to use the word promises, but, they're telling us that there are things they want to do. And so we're working with them, we're meeting with them, we're meeting with new people, and we're still trying to move this forward. Isn't that correct? I mean, that's where we are right now.
That's the only thing we can do, is keep pushing forward.
Right, right. Now, I've said this, you've said it, we got to close off the air right now, but I'm going to say it again, and that is, if everybody just falls off the wagon and Congress refuses to deal with it, then you and I will release everything that we know in every format we have. Correct? You still on board with that, Mike Zullo?
Yeah, I'm still on board with that, Carl.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we're going to make sure the world knows this one way or the other. All right. Well, Mike Zullo, thank you for being a part of the show today. We'll have you back, and I know people have questions for you, so we'll make that happen, okay?
All right, Carl, anytime.
Okay. God bless you. Thanks for being a part of the show today. Well, folks, there you heard it. You heard from Mike Zullo, my account, his account of what happened with the Jeff Miller, Dan McFall scenario. And you heard it went basically right along with everything I've said. Mike and I remembered exactly. I mean, we were there together. We know what we were talking about. Folks, God bless you. God bless America.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.